Okay, the recording is on, and we will get started. So today's Friday's daf was Yud. We're going to go back to Tesam and Beis because it's really in the middle of a shakla v'tarya. The Brisa stated that there are three instances in which get isha and shtar shichar are similar, and those two are different than any other type of shtars. So there's three ways in which shtar shichar and get isha are unique. The Gemara asked, why do you say there's only three? There's more. There's more than three, because on the list that, or missing from the list, which should have been added to the list, was if someone sends a shliach with a shtar and he dies. If it's a shtar matana, even though the person died, the recipient gets the matana. But if it's a get or a shtar shichar, he doesn't. The Gemara tried to deflect it by saying that since this is not unique, the shtar of a get and the shtar of a shichar, you also find a similar case by shtaris. Therefore, that wasn't on the list because it's not unique. It has to be something that's unique, only exclusive to get and shtar shichar. So then the Gemara asked, how about lishma? The what's unique about shtar shichar and the get of an isha, it has to be lishma. No other shtar would need to be lishma. The second thing is mechuber. It's very unique. Only get isha and shtar shichar cannot be written on a mechuber l'karka, like a leaf, but any other type of shtar can be. So that is what we were struggling with right now. So the Gemara wanted to say, maybe we're only discussing psulim that are derabbanan, not deraisa. Anything that's possible midaraisa, the Brisa is not listing. The Brisa is looking only for things that are possible midarabanan. And if a get's not lishma, it's possible midaraisa. If a get's written on mechub l'karka, it's possible midaraisa. We're only looking for derabbanans. So the Gemara asked, if that's the case, isn't the case where the Brisa lists off as one of the items? The Brisa lists off as one of the items that is unique to get isha and shtar shichar is that a guy that signs on it wouldn't be good, but a guy that signed on a shtar of a witness, like of a loan, that would be good. So that is definitely a question of a psul deraisa. A guy cannot sign a shtar a get because a guy can't be lishma. A guy is not in the Sefer Krisos. He's not in the Parsha of Gershon. So the Gemara suggested maybe that this brisa that lists off a get as being possible, but a guy signs is going according to Rabbi Elazar, who holds Edom Asir Karsi. And in fact, even if there were no Edom signed on the shtar at all, even if there's no Edom on the get at all, the get is good because the signature of the get on the shtar is irrelevant. What's relevant is the two Edom that are going to be proper Yidden that are going to witness him giving the get to her, him giving the get shichar to the Evet. And why is it possible midrabanan if there are goyim signed? Because Rabbi Elazar holds that if it's mezuyif b'toichai, if you don't have any Edom at all, that's not bad. But if you have possible Edom, that'll make it worse. And that's only midrabanan. Why? Because we're afraid if you give a get with possible Edom, someone watching might not realize that you're relying on the Edom Asira. They might think that it's the two possible Edom that are signed on the get that are affecting the Gershon. And that will be a problem because then they're going to start using Edi Chasima, when in fact it's going to be Edom Asira that are necessary. So that's a Derabana. So that explains that case that it's a Derabana. Zok Gemara, now getting on to the Yud Amud Aleph, which is where we're up to. So the Gemara says, although Rab Shimon might hold, because Rab Shimon argued, and Rab Shimon said that Pasal Eidim signed on the get would be kosher, and we said maybe it's because the Pasal Eidim that signed have goyish names that everybody knows they're goyish names. For instance, like Christopher, no one's going to think a Jew would be named Christopher, unless you hold of Christopher Columbus, because people say he was Jewish, but Christopher is not a Jewish name. There, it wouldn't possibly get, because there it's so obvious to people that there's no way the Edom signed on the get are what's creating the get. So everyone will know is the Edom is here. Correct? Remember, we still have another problem, because V'chazara deraisa, one of the cases that the Gemara offered up as an exclusivity that applies to get Isha and Star Shicher is that if you send it with the Shliach, you could back out before it gets to the hand of the woman or of the Eved. But if it was a Star Matana, even if the giver changes his mind, we say that the Shliach was already kinda whatever that gift was on behalf of the recipient. And that's a deraisa. The fact that someone could be mevatel shlichus is midaraisa. If he's mevatel the shlichus loilacha, so midaraisa is not a good get. And that's listed as one of the examples. So clearly, your argument that the Tana only uses examples where the psul by Gershon is derabanan is not valid. So we have to get back to the drawing board. Why didn't the Brisa list off the two additional examples that are exclusive to get Isha and to Shtar Shikwer, that they both need to be Lishma, and both of them cannot be written on a Mechabel Akar? So the Gemara now tries the final teretz, El Kikatani Milsa, the lesser B'Kedushin. The only thing that the Mishnah wants to list off are things that wouldn't be the same halacha by Kedushin. But Milsa the Isa the Kedushin, by Kedushin, according to most Rishonim, if you did Kedushin with a star, we learn from V'yatza V'haisa, which is a hekesh or a shava from Gittin to Kedoshim, that just like if you want to give a woman a get, you want to get rid of her with a star, which is a get, it has to be l'shma and it cannot be written on a mechubel karka. So too, if you're mekadosh anisha with a star, it cannot be a star that's mechubel karka, and it has to be l'shma. So therefore, the Mishnah didn't pick, or the Brisa didn't list off those two things, because those two things are not exclusive. They apply to Kedushin as well. For the Gemara, that's not a good argument either, because v'chazara gufa isa b'Kedushin. You can't tell me that the Brisa doesn't want to list anything that applies to Kedushin, because by chazara as well, if you send someone as a shliach to be mekadosh anisha, and you're chayzer before he gets to the woman, you could be chayzer, because it's a chay for a woman to get married. So you don't say Zachan Od of Shalem Fun. So once again, that argument was not a good argument. And for the Gemara, a very unique, limited argument. The Shlichus Bal Korcha. You know what we're talking about, according to Rashi? We're talking about where the man was divorcing his wife and she didn't want to be divorced. The man was freeing his Eved, the Eved didn't want to be free. You cannot have such a parallel case by Kedushin. You know why? Because by Kedushin, she has to be agreeable. So these are examples of Begerish and Isa uve Kedushin Lasa. You could never have a case by Kedushin that's Bal Korcha, because you cannot marry a woman Bal Korcha. That is how Rashi learns, which is a little bit difficult to understand, because you're telling me the Brisa picked a specific case to discuss the uniqueness of Get Isha and Shtar Shicher where they didn't want. So Tosfos broadened it a little bit. And he says, since in general, Gerishin and Shtar Shicher can be done Bal Korcha, therefore you can't ask me a kasha from Kedushin, which normally cannot be done Bal Korcha. And that takes us to the Mishnah on Yud Amud Aleph. And this is all going to be a review, because we've discussed already in quite great detail all of the cases that we're about to learn in the next couple of Mishnayos. Kol get sheyesh alav eight kusi pasuk. We said any star, for instance, a star mecher, that one of the witnesses that signed was a pasuk aid, for like an eight kusi. The halacha is that that's not a good star. But for a get or a star shicher, a pasuk aid would be good. It's mind-boggling. How could it be? The means for when the aid is only for proof, there one aid pasuk is no good. But when the aid is not only for proof, but it's to make the chalot, to make the get, to make the shicher, there one aid pasuk is good. We're going to need an explanation as to why. Maisa sheheviu lefnei Gamliel lechvar usnoi get isha vayu edov edei kusim. They brought a get to Rabbi Gamliel, and the Eidim were kusim. V'yichshur, and he was machshir. This is also very difficult because a moment ago we said that by Gittin Noshim, if one aid is a kusi, it's allowed. Rabbi Gamliel's case was when both Eidim are kusim. How do we correlate those two? It sounds almost like the story of Rabbi Gamliel contradicts the halacha that the Mishnah said a moment earlier. And the Gemara is going to discuss all of these questions. Mani Frek Gemara, who holds, like our Mishnah, that a kuti is not believed for a regular star, but he is good for a get? Mani Meslitzen, who could this Mishnah possibly be consistent with? Loi Tanakama, V'loi Rabbi Lazar, V'loi Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. There's a three-way machlokes how to react, how to deal with kutim. And no matter how you learn, it's not going to fit with our Mishnah. So who's going to be the author of our Mishnah? The Tanya we learned, matzahs kuti muteres. You're allowed to eat matzah prepared by a kuti, and you don't need to worry that it's chametz on Pesach. You can trust them that they made sure it didn't become chametz. But even more so, we know that all Pesach we can eat matzah that's not chametz. But the first night Pesach, when we're mekayim the mitzvah of achilas matzah, it needs to be shmura l'shem matzah's mitzvah. Can a kuti do that? Zok the Gemara, v'adam yoytzeba yidei chayvasei b'Pesach. A kuti is 100% trusted, not only to make sure that the matzah didn't have chametz, but they're even relied upon to make it l'shem matzah's mitzvah. A kuti is like a Jew. However, Rabbi Lazar argues, Rabbi Lazar Eiser, l'vishein bekiyin b'dektuke mitzvahs. Kutim cannot be trusted. Now, it sounds from the wording, they're not bekiyim, they're ignorant. But Rashi says it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that they don't know. It means they're choshed, we don't trust them. And Rashi says, if we look at Rashi inside, Rashi says, ein bekiyim b'dektuke mitzvahs. Rashi says, af b'achila kol yimei Pesach, the chashdinan lehu shema mechamtzin. We're afraid that they might purposely make it chametz. So therefore, they cannot be trusted. And Reb Shimon Gamliel says, kol mitzvah she'echziku b'kutim, if you see a mitzvah that the kusim actually listen to and follow, harabei medartekin ba Yosy Yisroel. They're even more careful about it than the Yid. You can rely on them even more than you could rely on the Yid. Now, what is the difference between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon Gamliel? So there's a big shaila in the Rishonim, but the way Rashi learns the Pashtus is that the Tanakama holds that anything that's a mitzvah d'oraisa, such as achilas matzah, a kuti, you can assume that he's trustworthy, like that. But if it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you cannot trust a kuti at all. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that if it's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, but we know for a fact that the kuti takes it seriously, we can trust the kuti even for that. Now, before we figure out the Gemara's kasha from this three-way machlekes, let's go back to analyze. Matzah's kuti muteres. Frek toisvis, the matzah of a kuti, there's a halacha that the bread that's made by a kuti is osur to eat. It's like chazer treif. So how could you allow a yid to eat matzah from a kuti if the Rabbanan were geyser that the bread of a kuti is osur to eat? And why did they make this gzeira? Because they were mevatel binyan beis hamikdash in the time of Ezra. This sounds very similar to what we're doing now to Angel's Bakery. They did a gevaldig avol, they stopped the binyan beis hamikdash, so their bread was boycotted. How did the Rabbanan boycott their bread? They boycotted the bread by saying that it's osur, at kedekach, Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, kol oichel paskuti ki ilu oichel basar chazir. It's like eating chazer treif. So how could you eat the matzah of a kuti? Zok Toisvis, it's speaking where the kuti didn't make the dough. A yid made the dough. After the dough was made, and it's the dough of a yid, it was given to the kuti just to form into matzah and to bake. That doesn't have an Isur Chila. And therefore you can trust the kuti, not only that it's not chametz, but that they also watched it l'shem matzah's mitzvah. So now we have our three-way machlokes. So let's see which of these three tanoim would fit in with our Tan. Itanakama. If it's a Tanakama, afilu shar shtaris nami. Since they're believed on the mitzvah d'oraisa, they're not going to sign l'sheker. So if they're believed for get, I understand, but they should believe for every star because it's a deraisa and they're makbid on it. So the Rabbanan cannot be the author of our mission. So according to the Rabbanan, they should be believed for any star. And even Rabbi Lazar, who did not believe at all, well then afilu gerish namilot. How can we trust him for a get? Rabbi Lazar says they're like goyim, we don't trust him. The Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, it depends. Either achzik, if it's something that they're into, they like this mitzvah, they follow this mitzvah, then afilu stars nami. Even other stars they follow. And either loy achzik, and if they didn't take to this mitzvah, afilu gerish nami loy. So we need to find a Tana who will make that distinction between a regular star that they're not believed for, yet a get that they are good for. So who would that be? The Chitemer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, if you want to say it's going according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and we're speaking in a case with the Achzik Bavel, Achzik Baha, it happens to be the Kuti that can be trustworthy for get, but cannot be trustworthy for Mominis, which is a very big doichik to say. But if that was true, then ihachi ma'ir yechad afilu trei nami. Why do we say only one eight kusi is neman for a get? Even if they're both kutim, according to Reb Shimon Gamliel, if it's achzik bey, they should be good eidim, because we said Reb Shimon Gamliel says if it's a mitzvah that they do, you can trust them 100%. Yet we know it's only one eight kusi that's allowed. If both eidim on the get are kutim, it's not allowed. Alam Amar Belazar lo yichshiru boy ela eid echad kuti bilvad, but not two. So we're at a loss. Who does our Mishnah hold by? And for the Gemara, La'olam Rabbi Lazar. Our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Lazar that a kuti is not trustworthy at all. So now that explains why they can't sign a regular star. But then how could they sign a get? Zok the Gemara, Gavalti Gezach. Uvechivan the Chasim Yisroel B'Soif. On the lower line, there's two lines to sign. On the lower line, the Yisroel signed. On the upper line, the Kuti signed. If a Yisroel is going to sign his name to a get that a Kuti signed on, there's no way a normal person would be willing to put his signature on a document that he knows a crook, a liar, is going to sign. So for the fact that there's a Yid signing on this get underneath the Kuti, it proves to us the lav the kuti chavar hava. If this kuti wasn't a reliable erlich person, lemachtim le mikamei, the yid would never have let the kuti sign above him, and he should sign underneath him. So therefore, our mission makes perfect sense, because by a get, the person signing knows that there's a kuti signed before him, yet he's still signing. It must be that this kuti is an erlich kuti, and this kuti for sure is trustworthy. So then why don't you say the same thing by star? If someone signs underneath the kuti, it proves it's a good kuti. Ella, no, you know why by shar staris we don't say that? Because by shar staris, he might have signed even though he didn't know that the kuti was going to sign after him. And Rashi describes this scenario. We're signing that Reuven borrowed $100 from Shimon. So I'm there, the Yisroel, and I see this happen. There's a couple of Rabbanim there that see that happening, and there's a Kuti there that see it happening. And I'm asked to sign the star. So I think to myself, who else are they going to ask to sign that star? Probably one of these Chashav Rabbanim. So I should sign first. I'm going to sign on the lower line. Then I'm going to go away. And then they'll get another 8 to sign, but they'll probably get one of the Rabbanim to sign. In the meantime, they got a Kuti to sign, but I never witnessed it. So since I never witnessed it, you can't say that I'm giving validity to the Kuti because I signed after him. I didn't even know he was going to sign. I signed on my line and I went away. I never found out who signed after me. I thought it would be a rough. Frankly, more. So if you say that's what happens by a regular star, so say the same thing happens by get, that you'll sign thinking that there's going to be a rough signing above you, and then you leave and then the Kuti signs. Dr. Gemara, no, by a get you can't do that. Omar Papa Zoyse Meres, Ede Haget and Chosman Zebelise. There's a rule by Gittin for a completely different reason, that by Gittin, you're never allowed to sign a get. No aid is allowed to sign a get unless all the aidim that are going to be signing the get are there together and they're all signing together. So therefore, by get, it's impossible that I'm going to sign and not know who the other signer is. I'm going to see the other signer. And if I see the kuti there in the bunch who's not reliable, I'm out of here. I'm not going to sign. So the fact that a Yisroel signed, that's a clear indication that the kuti that signed is an erlich kuti. But by a regular star chayv, we don't require that. Each guy can sign and go home. They could bring the star to different people to sign one at a time. So therefore, it's quite likely that the Yisroel signed not knowing that there would be a kuti sign on it. So now the question is, why is there such a rule by Gittin that all the Eidim have to congregate together and they all have to sign at the same time? My time is up to Gemara. You know why? A husband could make as many hoops to jump through when he makes his get. So he might say, I'm giving you a get, but I want the get to be signed by these 10 people. Now, if the husband says the get has to be signed by these 10 people, then the get has to be signed by these 10 people, otherwise the get is possible. So what happens if only 2 of the people sign, not all 10? Someone might think this is a kosher get, because there are 2 signatures, there are 2 Eidim, which is the norm, and they might give it to the woman. She'll think she's divorced, and she's not, because the get didn't have all 10 signatures. And that'll be a huge kilkel. It's being matter and ish. So therefore, they made a takana, anytime any Eidim sign on the get, all of the relevant Eidim have to be there. This way, there's no way they'll ever think that a get is good if not all the necessary Eidim signed on it. Because everyone has to be there at the same time, otherwise nobody signs. And once you have that, as a byproduct of that, we have this protection that if a Yisroel signed with the kuti, he for sure knows who else signed, and he's vouching for that kuti by the mere fact that he's placing his signature on the star together with that kuti. But by a star moment, you don't have that. Beautiful. That explains to us the Mishnah why an Eirechot kuti is good for a get, but not for dinamamonis. It's a practical thing, because by get, the Yisroel will know who else is signing. By dinamamonis, he will not. Gufa. The Gemara.
So by a get, they have, besides the line for the signature, the cipher writes down the name of the person that's signing.
Not necessarily, but they.
How do you know that? So how do you know that there have to be 10 people to sign the shtar?
Because what will happen is the Baal will say, I want 10 people to sign this shtar. Right? So when the Baal says, he says it to the cipher. So the cipher, before he releases the shtar, he has to get all those 10 people together, or else he can't release the shtar. So it's not like he'll write the get and give it to the Baal, and the Baal will go run around. They make all the Eidim that the Baal wanted gather there and sign it together.
But how does somebody know that there was 10? Maybe there was only 8 people.
Well, what can happen is the Rav who's in charge of the get, so the husband said, I want these 10 people. So the Rav will make sure that all 12 people sign. Otherwise, he will not release that get.
Okay.
So anytime there's a get, we assume, no matter how many people signed it, we assume that everybody that was supposed to did. Otherwise, the Rav would never have released it. Gewaltig. Zot Gemara weiter. Gufa. Amar Rabbi Elazar said about this Mishnah that only if one Eid Kuti is signed on the get, it's good. But if 2 Eidim are signed on the get, it's not good. Amar Rabbi Elazar lahichshiru bo ela Eid Echad Kuti bilvad. That's what Rabbi Elazar said as a commentary on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah sort of says that black and white. Why do we need Rabbi Elazar to say it? Because the Mishnah says, Kol get sheyesh of Eid Kuti possible, but by get isha it's kosher. So it seems to be saying that what's possible by a star, 8 kuzi puzzle, is kosher by a get, 8 kuzi puzzle, 1. So why would I think that it's mutter by a get even with 2 8? So Gemara, because even Masnisen, I would have thought by a get, even if both Eidim are kutim, it's a kosher get. It says chad, kol get sheish 8 kuti puzzle. I think on the chad mishum de v'shtarais afilu chad nami loy. Yes, kol get a regular star choid sheyesh of 8 kosi possible, even 1 8 is possible. Mashayim by get, but by get could be even both Eidim could be possible. The Mashal Rabbi Elazar, that's not how you should understand the Mishnah. Rather, when the Mishnah says that a kuti can sign a get, that's a maximum of 1 kuti, not 2. Fact Gemara, is that so? Utrei loy, vakatani ma'isa. Look at this story brought down as a support at the end of the Mishnah. Get isha, a dove plural, a day plural, kutim. So clearly there were 2 Eidim V'hichshir. So how could you, Rabbi Lazar, tell me that if there are two Eidim Kutim that's trying to get its puzzle, the story that the Mishnah brought with her Gamliel illustrates that it was kosher. Zoktimar, we have two terutzim. Either Amar Abaye, Tani Edoy. Yeah, change the word in the Mishnah. It shouldn't say Edav, it should say Edoy. But the Rabbi says, no, Lo'ilam Trey. In fact, the last sheet of the Mishnah, who's Rabbi Gamliel, argues on Rabbi Lazar, argues on the Tanakama, and says that even if both Eidim by a get Isha were Kutim, it's still going to be a good get. Rabbi Gamliel Miflik Polik, he argues on the Tanakama. Now, we have to, it doesn't say that in the Mishnah, so V'chisur Mechter, we have to add to the Mishnah. V'achigatani. Rabbi Lazar said, the first time they said that Baget is kosher. Rabbi Gamliel Machsher B'shnayim, yet Rabbi Gamliel's Machsher, even if there's two Eidim that are possible, Umay Sanami Shavi look there, Rabbi Gamliel look for Shnoi, get Isha, or Eidav Eidikutim V'echshir. So let's think about this. Why in the world would it be kosher? Let's think about it. Yeah, we understand why one Eid Kusi is kosher, because the Yisroel signing is vouching for him. But how can you explain why two Eid kosher? Two Eid Kusim should be kosher. The teretz is, it could be going like the Tanakama of the three-way machlokes we had before, that says that anything that's deraisa, you can trust the kuti for. So therefore, both Eidim could be kutim, because Gittin is deraisa. Beautiful. Let's see the next Mishnah. Kol hashtaros ha'olam ba'arkai shelo yedid. Any star, like for a mecher, or maybe matana, that was created in the secular court, and the witnesses are goyim. Sherim, that's a kosher star. Chutz mi Gittin Noshim v'shechrui avodim. Gittin Noshim and shechrui avodim, you need Yidin to sign. Otherwise, the get's not going to be a kosher get. Rab Shimon Aimer, af elu ksherim. Even if a get is signed by goyim, the get will be kosher. We already know why, because we learned already yesterday that the reason why it's kosher is because Reb Shimon is going according to the shita of Rabbi Lazar, who holds Eidei Mesira Karsi. The gets, the Eidim signed on the get are not what creates the transaction. It's the Eidim that are witnessing when the husband physically hands the get to his wife. That you have, that's why they would be kosher. Now you'll probably remember we learned Moide Rabbi Lazar ben Mezuyich Mitoicha. Rabbi Lazar holds Eidei Mesira Karsi. But that's if there's no Eidim at all, the get will be kosher because it's Eidim Mesira that's doing it. But Rabbi Lazar also said, but if there are possible Eidim signed, like Goyim, that already, he would not be matir, and we already learned that why wouldn't he be matir midrabanan? Because people are going to think that it's the Eidim Chasimi that are doing the transaction, which is not true. So the Gemara says, Rav Shimon's going to argue, Rav Shimon's going to hold that even if there's Goyim signed, we're not concerned that people will think that the Eidei Chasim are doing it. But not everyone, only if the Goyim had very clear Goyish names, like we learned a minute ago, like Christopher. If they had really Goyish names, then we don't need to worry that people might think it's the Eidei Chasim doing it. But if it was a Jewish sounding name, or a Goyish name that could be used like by a Jew, like Bernard, or like George, or Gary, Jews have such names. There, someone might think that it's Eidei Chasim doing the job, and there, Reb Shimon would agree. So Reb Shimon said, "Af eluk sherin," meaning it's kosher with possible Eidim sign, but only if the names of the goyim are clearly goyish names. And then there's a mysterious final line in the Mishnah that it's very hard to know what it means. So I'm going to read this line like the first step in the Gemara, how the Gemara first understands it. Loi huskuru, in the first shot that we're going to learn soon in the Gemara, is Reb Shimon continuing what he said. Reb Shimon said, Af eluk shevin, loi huskuru, we didn't mention that a get would be possible, ella bizman shenasu beheaded, if it wasn't made in a real court, it was made casually amongst goyim. I know it doesn't make any sense at all, so we'll hold off on understanding this line until we get to the Gemara. The main point is that this line doesn't seem to make sense.
Why? It makes very much sense. If
How
it
do
was
you
made in
understand
a
it?
Goyish court,
Right?
they're honest. The Goyish courts are honest. The only reason you say that the Goy isn't because you think that they're Mezuyah, that that they don't.
They might be honest, true, but they're goyim, and the chesima of a goy doesn't work on the get. So even if they're honest, they're goyim. Their chesima will not work on the get. But your pshat is good if this sentence was not spoken by Reb Shimon. If this sentence was spoken by the Tanakama, then it makes perfect sense. The Tanakama said that shtaris that are signed in a court, in a formal setting, you can trust the goyim. Loi huskaru, where do we say you cannot trust the goyim that are signed on a document? If they didn't sign it in a formal setting, like in a court, they signed it in a bar, in an office, there the goyim aren't trusted. They're only trusted to say the truth in court. They're afraid in court to lie. But anywhere else, they would lie. So that's how you explained this word in the Mishnah, and that's accurate 100%, because one of the pshatim in the Gemara will be, in fact, that this loy huskaru is not spoken by Reb Shimon. This loy huskaru is going back to the Tanakama, and it's saying exactly what Reb Beryl is saying, that the only time we say that a guy is not trusted is if he signs in an informal, in a casual setting. He's believed when he signs in court because then he takes it very seriously and he wouldn't lie. So, the Mishnah seems to make a blanket rule that any monistic ishtar is kosher if it's produced in a secular court signed by goyim. Loishna mecher, loishna matan. It doesn't mean if it's a shtar mecher, testifying to the fact that a sale occurred, or if it's a shtar matana, which the shtar creates the transaction to transfer the ownership of the field in question from the giver to the recipient. Zog to Gemara, Bishlema mecher. Mecher, I understand why you could trust the goyish system, the secular system, because michayoyev zuzah kamayu budakana. What actually makes the kinyan, the chalois of the kinyan kesef? The buyer gives money to the seller, and that creates a transfer of ownership of the karka into the buyer's rishos. So what is the purpose of the shtar? The shtar is merely the proof that the buyer purchased it. So all we need out of this shtar is to trust it. Well, that's perfect. We trust the goyim in the secular court system that they'll be honest. The loy yoyev zuzah kamayu, if these witnesses didn't witness the transaction where the buyer gave the money to the seller, they would have never signed the shtar that they saw this transaction occur. So you believe them that this transaction occurred. The chalois kinyan they didn't do, that happened with the kinyan kesef, but they're believed to say that this occurred. Elamatana, if you want to say that the Mishnah is even referring to shtar matana, there the shtar has to create the chalois. It's the shtar that causes the transfer of the asset. The maikakani. How does a goy have the ability to make a chalois? La b'hishtara, the only thing that happened here was the shtar was given over. The high shtar chas b'ba'amu. But the shtar is like earthenware. It's like clay. It's a shard. So how could it possibly make that chalois? Amar Shmuel agabaltik yichidish dina de malchusa dina. There's a halacha that when there's a din that's a secular law, it becomes binding halacha. So if you do a sale by signing documents, and that's what constitutes a sale for secular purposes, that's considered a sale minadin. As a matter of fact, any reasonable din that the malchus makes is a din. Rabbi Haim is makbid, not the speed, because he holds din of the malchus din and says you're not allowed to speed. He holds it's asur la'alacha to speed. Maybe a shtar matana, in fact, wouldn't work if a guy signed it. But don't say it works except for Gittin. Say it works except for anything that's like Gittin. In other words, anything where the shtar has to create the chalois, where the shtar has to make the transaction happen, there a guy wouldn't be good for. A goyish a shtar and a goyish a court is only good if it's a question of proof because we could trust him. Beautiful. Rab Shimon Omer Af Eluk Sherin, he holds even if there's goyish edim on the get, it's a kosher get. Fact Gemara, how could goyish edim make a get? A goy is not ben krisus, therefore his signature will not give the get the koyach to break up a marriage. Amar Abzera, it must be working with Rabbi Lazar who holds edim isir karsi. Yarad Rabbi Shimon l'shitase shel Rabbi Lazar damar edim isir karsi. Correct the Gemara. Rabbi Lazar would hold edim isir karsi if there was no signature on the get. But if there's a possible signature on the get, even Rabbi Lazar would agree it wouldn't work. So how come Rabbi Shimon holds it works? You know what we're talking about? Turning now onto today's daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. So now we're on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Shemos mufhakin. When does Reb Shimon say that you can use a get and rely on Edim Mesir Karsi, and you don't have to worry that people are going to think that it's the Edim Chesima that's doing it? That's if it's so clear from the names of these people that they're goyim. Therefore, there's no chashash that someone might think that it's the Edim Chesima that are affecting the get, and they'll be relying only on Edim Mesir. Correct the Gemara, Heichi Dami Shemos Mufhakin. Can you give me some examples of names that are for sure goyish names? Amar Papa, goyin Hormiz, or Abudina, or Bar Shipsoi, or Bar Kidri, or Ubati, or Nakamuna. These are all names of Dayanim. Rashi says Dayanim Avdikacham. These are real goyish names, like O'Leary, O'Malley. These are real goyish names, and according to Reb Shimon, if a get had such a goyish name on it, the get would be kosher with Edim Mesira, because everybody would know that no one's focusing on the Edim Chasim. Beautiful. Zok to Gemara, Aval Shemos she'em mufhakin. What if it was a name that could be a Jewish name, it could be a goyish name? What would you say? Loi, that the get wouldn't be good? Ihachi adetani seifa. So now we're getting to that unusual line in the Sefer. And unlike what Rav Beryl said earlier, the Gemara now is assuming that these words were spoken by Reb Shimon. And Reb Shimon said, Loi Huskuru. We didn't say that the get would be possible with Goyim, Elabizman Shenasu Behedit. Only if it was signed in a casual forum, not in the Bezin. Frek the Gemara, live like the list of B'didah. Why go to a case where we're signed in a different place? Let's stay close to what we're discussing. Where does Reb Shimon say that the get would be kosher when goyim are signed on it? That's b'shemos mufhakin. That's if the names are clearly goyish names, and there's no chashash that someone would think that they're affecting the get. If the goyish names on the get are names that might belong to Jews, there we have a real concern that someone will think that they're doing the get. Loi, Dr. Gemara, that's what the Brisa should have said. Why did Reb Shimon say that faraway case of the head it doesn't work? Say even in Bezdin it doesn't, even if it's in a court, it doesn't work if the names could be Jewish names. Dr. Gemara, Hachanami Kamer. That in fact is what Reb Shimon does mean to say. And this is what he says. Where do I say, Reb Shimon, that even if goyim are signed on the get, it's a good get? That's if the names are clearly goyish names. If it was goyish names, but they might belong to Jewish people, then it's possible. So what the Reb Shimon is really saying, this get with names that could be Jewish is possible like an etrog without a pitin. So all Shimon is doing is he's comparing it to something else that has nothing to do with Gittin that's possible. He could have picked an etrog without a pitin. But instead, what he said was, Nasa can be Shanasa behedit, It's like a star of mominus that was not signed in a court. And like we said earlier, a star of mominus that was not signed in a court, upsulim, it would be possible. So it's Reb Shimon talking. It's a little bit of a funny expression that if this name could be a Jewish name, it's possible like a star of mominus that Goyim signed, but not in court, so therefore they're not afraid to lie. That's the first shot in the Gemara. The Bayasema, or maybe you can have a different shot. Seifa also the Gittin moment. And this is exactly how our barrel explained it. Maybe the Loy Amru is not Reb Shimon talking, or the Loy Huskru is not Reb Shimon talking, it's rather the Tanakama talking. The Tanakama said that if two Goyim sign on a star in a secular court, they're believed. Loy Huskru Gittin moment the Psulim El Bizman Shanasu Behedit. Where are they puzzled? If the signature was done not in court where they're afraid to lie, rather it was done in a different setting, and there they're not believed. Beautiful. Tanya, we learned a Brisa. Now the Gemara is going to elaborate a little bit on these rules of a Gittin moment. It depends if it's in a formal setting like a court or not in a formal setting, but by Kedoshim, no matter what, it's going to be good if it's a Goyish name. So we're going to go through the details. Tanya Omer Abelazar Reb Yosy. Kach Omer Reb Shimon leChachamim beTzidon. This is what the Chachamim, Reb Shimon told the Chachamim in Tzidon. Lo nechleku Reb Akiva Chachamim. So now we're just introduced to a new machlokes. There was no argument between Reb Akiva and the Chachamim al kol ashtoris ha'olim bar kosh lo the Chachamim on any monistic star that was produced in a secular court. Even though they're signed by Goyim Ksher, like our Mishnah says, because we know that they're not going to lie. The are always going to be crusted with Goyim if it's clear that they're Goyish names. Where is their machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim? And I'm going to touch this like Rashi. A star of Nemonus, like I saw alone occur, that was signed by a goy, but not in a formal secular court. It was signed in the lawyer's office. There's a machlokes. So Rabbi Akiva machshir, Rabbi Akiva holds you can trust a goy even if it's in an informal setting. They're not going to sign on a lie. That's what Rabbi Akiva holds. That's not what our Mishnah says. This is a new shita that we're learning right here, right now. That Rabbi Akiva holds not only in a court do we trust the signature of a goy, even not in court. The Chachamim Poislin, but the Chachamim hold that only in court do we trust the signature of a goy. Which are completely different, where Reb Shimon holds that if they're signed by goyim, but it's obviously a goyish name, we'll be able to use the get and rely on the Eid Masir. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel now once again introduces us to a new concept. And he said, even if it's Shemos Mubhakin, I will not allow the get because we're going to be Geyser Gzeira L'Gzeira. If we're going to allow Shemos Mubhakin, where people know the get couldn't have been done through the Eid Chasima, we're afraid that people will also use Gittin that are signed with names that could be Jewish. And that could lead to a problem because that might lead to someone thinking that it's the Eid Chasima that are affecting the get. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says, I don't allow it. But I'll tell you what I would allow. Reb Shimon Gamliel, when do I allow a name that's obviously a Goyish name? Only if it's in a city where Klal Yisrael are being oppressed and Goyim always want to take away our sense of humanity. So they said Jews are subhuman. They cannot sign any formal official document. So it was also for Yidden to sign shtaris. It was illegal for Yidden to sign Gittin. So Zok Reb Shimon Gamliel, in such a city, everybody knows that the signatories on the get are Goyim. So there's no chash that someone might think that the Eid Chasima are impacting the get. because everybody knows they're goyim, because everybody knows that we're in a city where only goyim can sign a get. But in the place where Jews do sign, loy, I'm not going to allow such a get to work, even if it's obviously a goyish name. Correct, Gemara? I don't understand. If you, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, are so concerned that you're outlining even a get that has an obviously goyish name, it's so clear that it's goyish, and you're only doing it because of exera. We don't allow a real goyish name because it might spread to a name that's not goyish. Well, then why aren't you equally concerned even in a place where no Jew signs a get? Correct the Gemara. Makom she'en Yisrael choshman namin ligzar atu makom she'Yisrael choshman. Dr. Gemara, no. Where will Reb Shimon ben Gamliel make the gzeira? Shema b'shema. Michlef. I'm worried that a real goyish name could be mixed up with a semi-goyish name. And therefore, he says that even if it's a real goyish name, I don't want that get being used. But no one's ever going to think that just because they're in a city where no Jews could sign, and there we allow the get to work, no one's going to think that the get should also work in a place where Yidden could sign. And that is his shita. And that's the end of the sugya. So now we know all the different shitas. We know that goyim who sign a star in the secular bezdin, one shita is that it works even to create a transaction because of din al-Muhusadina, which was Shmuel. The other shita was it only works if it's a proof, but not to create a transaction. And Rabbi Kiva held, according to Rashi, that even if the goy signed not in the courtroom setting, even in an office, that would also be believed. When it comes to Gittin, if it's a regular name that could be Jewish or Goyish, for sure that's not acceptable for a get. It's awesome. If it's a get that's signed with obviously Goyish names, then according to Reb Shimon, it's acceptable. And if it's obviously Goyish names and it's a city where Jews never sign a get, then even Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that the get is acceptable. Beautiful. Ravina Sobar Lachshure B'Chanufiyasa Darmui. Ravina wanted to accept a star as a kosher star. It wasn't signed in a court. It was signed in a gathering, club. Omer Rafram said you cannot do that. Arkoisnan. The Mishnah says if it was written in a court. If it's not written in a court, it's unacceptable. Omer Rava. Hashtar Parsa. What if you had a star that was written in Persian? So we can't trust it, but the Masre Nehele Ba'apesada Yisroel. The star was given over, let's say, from the Loiva to the Malva, and there are two kosher Yidden watching it. Would that be a star that would be a kosher star that you could trust it? Zokt the Gemara Magbinin Ve'im Bnei. You could trust the star, but not to be goyve min chasim mishubadim, only to be goyve from the chasim b'nei chayrin. The malba can collect from the loiva with it, but the malba cannot collect from people who purchased property from the loiva.
I don't understand. Others is a star.
I'm sorry?
Either it is a star or it's not a star. What are you making it a half star? You're making it a star to be goyve?
That's a beautiful, beautiful question, and that's one of the questions that the Gemara is going to have to resolve. So first, the Gemara attacks Bichlal. How could it be a good star? How could you say that if two Yidden watch this star being passed on from the Levi to the Malva, that they could witness? They can say this is witnessing a halva. They don't need. They can't even read it. It's in Persian. They don't read Persian. Zog the Gemara b'diyadi. The case was, Rava says, of course, if they don't understand what it says in the star, of course, that doesn't mean anything. It's speaking where they read the star, and the star is from Reuven to Shimon, and it's Reuven telling Shimon, I borrowed $100 from you. Correct the Gemara, but there's another problem with the Persian star. They used to make the stars secure forgery proof. How did they do it? They put a black film over the star, and then you wrote what you had to write. Now, if somebody wanted to change some wording in the star and erase one of the words, it would also erase the black film. So even if you wrote the new word that you wanted to write, the black film would be missing. So it would be obvious to anybody that the star was tampered with. The stars in Persia weren't made that way. So how can you rely on the star if it's so easy to make a correction on it after it was signed? Persian stars don't have this security feature. And it's speaking by a Persian star that they did put a black film on it, and it did have the security feature. Okay, but there's another feature that a Persian star does not have that's needed in a real star, and that's tzarech sheyachzir mein yonesh star b'shidach. There has to be a summary of the whole star on the last line right before the Eidim sign. Veleka, Persian stars aren't written that way. It's speaking where the Persian star was written that way. So Frank Gemara, it's a perfect star like Rebbeinu asked. If it's a perfect star, so how could you say it doesn't work completely? So how come you can't be going on Mishabadin? Why isn't it a real star? Exactly like what Rebbeinu asked. Like tomorrow last lake Kala. Why is it that a star, a middle of a star, you can be going on Mishabadin? Because everybody will know that Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, which means moving forward, anybody who buys a property from Reuven knows well and clear that there's a chance that the Malbo is going to come and repossess the field. You know what creates the coil? You know what creates the buzz? When two Jews sign on the star, they start talking about it, and that creates a buzz. When Goyim sign on the star, they don't talk about it. It doesn't make a buzz. So the reason why, really, it's a perfectly good star. But the reason why we're not going to Mishabadim is because then you're prejudicing, you're making it bad for a future purchaser who had no idea that there was a chance that their field that they're buying from Reuven would be repossessed. Last like Kala. Zaktik more about it. Boy Mine Rish Lakish Mir Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish asked the question of Rabbi Yochanan, now going on to Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Edom Achasumin ala get. Edom signed on the get. And Rashi says, this is a get that's coming from Eretz Yisrael. So, Eretz Yisrael is a place where Jews live. So this is a get that originated in Eretz Yisrael, yet there are some Goyish names on the get. Now, can we use this get with Edom Asira? We'll make sure that there's two kosher Edom watching the get being given over. So let's ignore the names on the star. But we need to know if you can assume that they're real Goyish names, and therefore we can rely on the Edom Asira. Amalei, Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rish Lakish, we only had one case, so I can't answer you on every single name. Every name has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And we had one case, so I can give you the answer for one case. Elo Lucas and Luz. There were two people signed at the star. One name was Lucas, and one name was Luz. And we passed that these are for sure Goyish names, and therefore you can use the get with Edom Asira. V'davka Lucas for Luz, the Loishchichi Yisroel, the Maski B'Shmasari.
Why, we have a Luz in Toronto.
We have a Luz? We have a Luz in Toronto. That's right. That's right. So Zok Gemara, Davka Lucas for Luz, the Loishchichi Yisroel, the Maski B'Shmasari. Avo Shemos Achrini, other names, the Shchichi Yisrael, the Maski B'Shemasayu, that maybe Jews do have such names, loy, that would not be good. So we're on one end of the spectrum. We have a name that's so goyish that we know for sure they can't make the get into a get, and you have to rely on the Edom Asira. I'm going to prove to you the other opposite end of the spectrum. Gittin Gittin that come from Chutz La'aretz, ve'edim chasumin alayim, and there are edim signed on the get. Even if they sound like goyish names, nevertheless, kshem they're kosher. You know why? Most Jews in Chutz La'aretz, they have goyish names. So here you see that not only aren't you chosher that it's a goy, you're sure that it's a yid, and the Eid Chasima work. So how could you tell me that it's you're so sure that it's goyish? You need Eid Mesira. Forget it. Here you have a brisa that says you can rely on Eid Chasima. Zok Gemara, you can't ask me a kasha from that brisa. The brisa is very clear as to why over there we can assume they're Yidden. Who's going to sign the get? Usually it's going to be a Yid. I to Goyish name. Well, that's because most people in Eretz Yisrael most people the Chutz La'aretz have Goyish names. So only if the get comes from Chutz La'aretz can you say that a Goyish name is probably a Jew. But in Rabbi Yochanan's case, where it was in Eretz Yisrael where the get originated, and that had a Goyish sounding name, there, unless we can be sure that it's a Goyish name, we would have to rely on the Eid Mesira. If we're sure it's a Goyish name, we could rely on the Eid Mesira. If not, then the get's possible. There's another nusach that Rish Lakish wasn't asking Rabbi Yochanan about a get that came from Eretz Yisrael. Rish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan about a get that came from Chutz La'aretz and had a Goyish name. And what did Rabbi Yochanan answer? And Rabbi Yochanan said, in fact, you can assume that they're Jews. So the shaila here is, what's up is all the Eden, the Chutz La'aretz have Goyish names? What exactly does this mean? So I saw in the there's a pamphlet that comes out every day on the daf. He brings out a very interesting shaila, and he says in the time of the Spanish Inquisition, some of the Jews gave everything up and they left with the clothing on their backs, but the Eden who couldn't withstand in the sun and they wanted to hold on to their assets, they changed their names to be Goyish names, and they started to live full Goyish lives, going to church and not doing all the mitzvahs. They're chai v'karos, they didn't go to the mikveh. It was horrific. But all of these anusim, when they had an opportunity to leave Portugal, they left Portugal. And they went to Amsterdam, to Holland, where they were able to act as Yidden. But they still had their assets. They couldn't liquidate their assets because they would be suspicious. So they had to hire managers and portfolio managers to manage their assets, which means even when they were out of the clutches of the Inquisition, they were in Amsterdam, they were in Holland, they still have to be in regular communication with their managers. So can imagine this guy's name is Christopher, and now he sends a letter to his manager from Chaim Zavel Friedman. In a half a second, they're going to know that he's Jewish, and they're going to confiscate all of his assets. He doesn't want that to happen. So he asked the Shaila, but Amar Shtam, can I continue using my horrible Goyish name? So the Mashtam says, even though it's horrible to use a Goyish name, especially a name that's associated with Chai V'Krisos, and you need to purge yourself and disconnect yourself from that. But since there's a Hefsed Meruba over here, Avada, you're allowed to continue using your Goyish name to protect your assets. So we can't fathom what horrible tsaros Yidden used to go through. But there was a time where the Yidden had to take on really Goyish names because of the nisyonis that they went through, and that's probably what this Gemara is referring to, that Rov Yisroel and Chutz La'aretz have Goyish names. I remember I had a Rebbe in 9th grade, Reb Shimon Sturman Zatzal. He didn't like when people used non-Jewish names in yeshiva, when boys would call themselves John and Gary and George. So Reb Shimon used to always tell us, Jewish names aren't only for gravestones. We're supposed to use our Jewish names when we're alive as well. However, Yekis are makbid not to use their Jewish names for divrei chayil. So all Yekis actually have a secular name that they use when they're doing secular things, and only for Yiddish Zachen do they use their holy Yiddish name.
I remember in 1950, 48, 50, there was an organization called Shin Yud Kuf. And it was all over New York. I remember it vividly. And I asked somebody what the name of Shin Yud Kuf was. He says, Shem Yisrael Kodesh.
Wow. So what did they do? They promoted Jewish names?
They promoted using your Hebrew name.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Baltic.
The fellow who ran it was a fellow by the name of Goldstein, and he had a printing shop in Borough Park.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, gewaltig. Ha'aymer, look, the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Ha'aymer, this is again a mission that we already learned, so this is really going to be a simple chazar. Ha'aymer tein getzel ishti. Someone went to a shliach leilocha and he said, "Give this get to my wife." Ushtar shicher zelav, give this shtar shicher to my servant. Imrotza lachsar b'shneim yachsar. According to Reb Meir, he can be chayv on both of them. Divrei Reb Meir, like we learned earlier, because it's a chayv, and therefore you don't say zachan adam shloi b'fanav and a chayv. It's bad to get meguresha; she loses her mezainos, and it's bad for an evet to be freed.
But you have to say over here that it was all before he was mitzvah to get, or the shtachicha, because once he was mitzvah to get in the shtachicha,
correct,
it's finished.
That's right. That's right. This means he could be chayzer before the get got into the hands of the woman or the evet. 100%. Thank you for clarifying that. The Chachamim Moimrim, the Gittin Noshim. Gittin Noshim is a chay for a woman. She's losing her mezainis. Avoloi b'shechure evadim. For an Eved to get free, that's a schia. And therefore, Zachan Adam Shlai B'fanav, the Eved goes free right away as soon as the Shliach gets the star. Why is that? And we know that there's nothing good about being an Eved. It's not like an Eved could say, I want to stay an Eved, it's good for me to be an Eved, because at least I'm getting supported, because you're not even mechuyev to support your evet. So there was nothing in it.
Yosy, there were a lot of avodim when they were freed from slavery in America that didn't have what to do, and they were ready. They said, please, I want to go back to my odin.
In fact, Reb Meir holds that it's a chayv for an evet to be freed. And that's what Reb Meir holds. We'll see other reasons why it's better for an evet to stay an evet. But the Chacham hold that an evet just wants out because he has no benefit. But if someone says, I don't want to support my wife, he can't say that. So therefore, for a wife, it's for sure not a good thing to get divorced because she's losing her support. Amar lahem, so Reb Meir told the Chachamim, how could you say that an Eved has no benefit by staying an Eved? If this Eved is the Eved of a Kohen, the Eved has the right to eat Truma. If he becomes freed, he won't be able to eat Truma anymore. That's not a good thing. So why do you say that it's a schos for the Eved? And Rashi explains, he's not really changing the Eved's status and removing his ability to eat Truma. The Eved only was able to eat Truma as a byproduct of the fact that he belonged to the Kohen. Now he doesn't. It's a little bit difficult to understand because the fact is he's losing his benefit of being able to eat Truma. So Rashi says we have to wait for the Gemara to explain it better. Yosef, Rav Huna, Rav Yitzchak, Bar Yosef, Kamed Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak were sitting in front of the Rebbe, Rav Yirmiyah. Yosef, Rav Yirmiyah, the Kamenam. Rav Yirmiyah fell asleep. The Rebbe fell asleep. So the Talmidim started having a discussion and learning. Yosef, Rav Huna, Bekamar, and he said, Shemamina midirabbanan. Since the Rabbanan say that the Shliach on behalf of the Eved could be kanya the Eved for himself, even though the Adon changed his mind later, you see from here that a toivist lebal chayiv kan. If Reuven owes Shimon money, Yehuda has the right to go to Reuven's assets and grab something that's worth the value of the chayiv and give it to Shimon. So you see from here that you could be toivist lebal chayiv. Amar lei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, so Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef asked Rav Huna, "Va'afilu b'makom shechav l'achayim." What if not only is Shimon owed money, but what if Levi is also owed money? Can Yehuda still seize property from Reuven to give to Shimon? It's hurting Levi because now Levi won't be able to collect from that asset. Amar le'in. Rav Huna said yes, even though when Yehuda is seizing something of Reuven to give to Shimon, he's hurting Levi, he's still allowed to do it. And that was their discussion. At the Hachi, as they're having this discussion, Isser b'hu Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah woke up. And if you think he didn't hear every word, you're wrong. Because Amar Lahu Dardiki, he said, Kai Taida Kindalach. Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. In fact, it wouldn't work. In time of Mishnah Seinu, didn't you just bring a raya from our Mishnah from the fact that the shliach can seize the evet for himself? It's a toivus l'bachlev. It's different. You know why it's different? Because he didn't just mix himself in. The Adon gave him the get shichur. The Adon invited him in. In time of Mishnah Seinu, our Mishnah is different because when the Adon gave this star shichur to the shliach, he even meant that you could be zoicha in this eved for himself. So you can't bring a raya to Yehuda who no one invited him, no one asked him. He just goes on his own to seize Reuben's assets. There you can't bring any raya that would work. Beautiful. Amar Rab Chisda, exactly the question that we're discussing. This is actually dependent on a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabban. It's not we learned. What happens? We know peya, like a chikha peya, the matnas aniyim. We just learned about it today in the Gilus Rus. They're exclusively for aniyim. Well, what if I'm a rich guy and I have a friend Nebuch who's very poor, and I want to help him out? So I went and I took peya from a field, not for myself. I did it. I'm being zoich in it because I want to give it to Ruvain the ani. Will that work? Can I do that? Rabbi Eliezer said you could be zoich. Now think about it. If I'm taking this payout for my friend Reuven the ani, you know who's not able to take it? Every other ani. So this is mamish a case of toifus l'bachayid b'makam shechav la'acher. Because I'm taking leka chicken payout for one ani, but it's at the expense of another ani. But Rabbi Eliezer says it works. No, you got to give it to the first ani you find. You have no right to get involved here. So this seems to be exactly that shaila. Amar member v'timar papa. No, this is a totally independent shaila that has nothing to do with our shaila of tavus l'bachay. And Zok Gemara why? So we're going to turn on to Daf Yud Beis Amar Aleph. Dr. Gemara, Dilmalohi, Atkan like Kamar Rabbi Eliezer, Awesome. You know why Rabbi Eliezer holds you could do this? Because you would really be able to take the payah for yourself. Ayer and Ashir, you can technically be mafker all of your possessions, and now you're an ani. And now you're entitled to take this payah for yourself. Since at this point you have a right to take it for yourself, you can take it for your chaver. But in a regular case of toivus l'bachoid loy, you never have any right to seize Reuben's assets, so you cannot take Reuben's assets on behalf of Shimon. So therefore, you don't have a right that Rabbi Eliezer holds toivus l'bachoid v'makom shechav l'cherem works. On the other side, you don't have a right from the Rabbanon that it doesn't work. Because the icon like Rami Rabbanon Hasam el dechsiv loy salaket. So the pasuk says loy salaket la'ani v'lager tazavoisa. But we carve out the word la'ani and we connect it to the loy salaket. And we say loy salaket la'ani. The pasuk says you're not allowed to go pick it for another ani. Each man has to collect it for himself. That's why it doesn't work here. Loy salaket la'ani. But by a regular balchayv, there's no pasuk that says you can't do it. Loy. So maybe you could seize Reuben's assets to give to Shimon. For the Gemara, we have a pasuk that seems to say that you're not allowed to take for a different ani, even if you're an ani. So if Rabbi Eliezer highlights a lock in my ovidly, what's he going to do with this pasuk? So tomorrow he's not going to use this pasuk to say that you cannot take for a different ani. He uses it to teach you another law. What if you have an ani, but he happens to own a property, but he's an ani and he's roy to take tzedakah? Could he take his own payah? No. His field, he has to give the matnas aniyim. He's got to leave payah for aniyim. He needs money. He can go take payah from somebody else's field. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we finished off Yud Aleph, and Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn Daf Yud Beis. Mishum, we're going at 7 a.m. and again at 9 a.m.
Okay, I want to ask the question. Yosy, I want to ask the question.
Please.
If a guy has his property is all mortgaged. It's really not his property, it's the bank's property here. Does he have to still give leket and payer?
Probably, because it's not really the bank's property, even if it's fully mortgaged. And I'll tell you what the litmus test is. What if this property doubles in value? That's his benefit. It's his gain. It's not the bank's gain. The banks have a lien on it, but technically he's the owner.
I remember I was once talking to Rabbi Price many, many, many years ago. And I had just started working for Olympia in York for the Reichmans. And he says, die meinst Reichmans and Rache Eden. Sie sind ein gut nicht wert. Es ist alles ein Bluff. Ich bin ein Neusche. Ich hab Mount Pleasant and Young Street is Mounts. In a Chonischke mortgages.
Right, and they were all encumbered. But look what happened. Because when you're encumbered, it means you're using your equity to make more equity. By being fully encumbered, it means you're using whatever equity you have access to grow even more, to grow exponentially.
Yeah, but he said, sei haben gut nicht.
Yeah, technically he was right.
And then the Meister says, so soft master.
Huh? At the end of the day, they lost everything.
Never.
Yeah.
Toronto lost.
Toronto lost in a big way.
But I'll tell you something. He taught Toronto to give.
Yeah, the lesson that he taught Toronto and the way he transformed the city, that will have forever.
Yeah.
And that changing people and changing attitudes is probably a bigger accomplishment than giving so much tzedakah. He actually impacted and influenced how other people look at life and look at wealth.
That's right. I remember him saying.
And he never dictated. He never preached. He taught everybody by leading by example.
He told me, he says, Beryl, I don't have anything.
Wow. Yeah, we were lucky to be in their presence. That's right. That's right.
How many people do you have in Toronto?
That's right. That's a big vote of confidence. Beautiful. Well, you see a lot of Yiddish nachas. Can I know? Continue to see more and more and more nachas. It should grow exponentially.
Baruch Hashem. I have absolutely no complaints to the Rebbeinu Shalom.
She was to continue marrying off generation after generation, and she was to lead them all to Mashiach, together with you.
Amen. Amen.
Okay,
have a good night.
Thank you. Get to